Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cybersecurity Awareness Month 2025. Now, today we're going to dig into one of our weekly themes, how to address cybersecurity attacks. And we're going to drill down into some of the strategies on how to protect yourself against some of these attacks. Not only protect yourself, but detect them and recover from some of these most prevalent threats. We'll also pay special attention to how AI is making some of these attacks much more stealthier and deadlier. My name is Steve Kennison, and I'm responsible for cybersecurity and resilience messaging here at Dell. Now, the first thing I'd like to do is have my panel introduce themselves. Let's first start with Amy Price. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Steve. I'm Amy Price. I'm the evangelist for cybersecurity for our PC business.
Thank you. And Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel Tyler. I am a cybersecurity advisory consultant, and I work with all of our cybersecurity strategic partners in our services section.
Thank you. And last but not least, Jim.
Steve, thanks for having me. Jim Shook. I am the global director for our cybersecurity and compliance practice.
Thank you all. Now let's get started. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to begin with Jim. However, before I ask my first question to Jim, I'd like to take a minute and explain how we came up with this topic and some of the thoughts that I had. Now, this year at Dell Technologies World, we had a cyber range tabletop/exercise pertaining to different types of cybersecurity threats. We had 9 types of threats in the range, from supply chain to malicious insider to prompt injection. And of these 9 attack types, the top 3 that the participants chose to hear about were backup infiltration, DDoS attacks, and ransomware. Now, I started to think about this, especially this last one, ransomware. I started to think about how all the different types of situations that were on the board were a type of an attack, and they represented how threat actors got into an environment. Now, at the end of the day, a cyber attack is really about one thing: to cause harm to the organization that's being infiltrated. Now, one of the most typical types of an attack, or the results of an attack, is ransomware. Whether data is being encrypted such that companies can't use their data, or the data has been stolen, and in order to have access to keep it from being leaked, you have to pay a ransom. And Jim, I know you and I have chatted about this, but first, what I'd like to understand is, first, do you agree or disagree with this process that ransomware is more a result of a type of an attack? And also, while we need to pay attention to all the ways that attacks can get in, and we also understand that AI is only growing the ways that attacks can infiltrate organizations, does the attack type or the attack results change how we think about getting the environment back to operational?
Yeah, two great questions in there, Steve. The first one, I agree with you. I think ransomware is more of a result or maybe a goal. And I've seen others with very different definitions. So I think it's important to clearly talk about what you mean by the term. Otherwise, an organization is going to miss threat vectors. And I'll give you an example of what I'm seeing today. For most people, I think ransomware equates to malware. So that's an evil piece of software that gets access to an organization. It worms around, gets to other assets, and then eventually encrypts data. That's certainly something we've seen, NotPetya and WannaCry from years ago being 2 really good examples. But if that's your definition, you're going to miss more updated TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures that threat actors use, like hands-on keys. So they're logging in, they look like administrators, they don't necessarily use malware, but as you point out, the outcome might still be something like ransomware. So I think the better way to think about this is to think about a high-level flow. I wouldn't call it a kill chain because it's not formal, but the steps that a threat actor is going to take in an attack. So they're going to do some reconnaissance. They're going to get initial access, which is commonly maybe some credentials that they've stolen, or phishing or vishing, video phishing, which you point out with AI has become so credible, and they do a great job with it, unfortunately. Once they get that access, they're going to move laterally, and eventually when they're satisfied, they're going to create an impact. That's how MITRE ATT&CK framework talks about it. And that impact commonly is going to be, as you point out, encryption, or data exfiltration, or data destruction, and sometimes all three of these. So the threat actor, for me, ransomware is more about the business model of doing those things and then extracting money from you based on the impacts that they had. It might be selling back the decryption key. It might be a promise to not use or publish the data, but that's more the business model. And Steve, I wanted to touch briefly on your last point. How does it change about how we think about recovering? Absolutely, it's going to depend on the impact. So you have to be prepared for any of the impacts that are out there. Of course, if you can stop the threat actor, you don't have to worry about the impacts, but the recovery process is going to be different. For example, if it was a destructive attack, you don't have the ability to pay for a ransom. So we don't commonly see those, but they're possible. And I'd contrast that with an exfiltration attack where nobody likes to have their data stolen, but there's nothing you have to recover. You just have to eradicate the threat actor. Your systems are up and running versus a ransomware destructive attack where you've got to actually recover those. So, Steve, I think it's why important not to get too caught up in the definition, but just to kind of think plainly and clearly about the problem.
I think you're right on, Jim, and thank you very much. I really appreciate your perspective. Now let's shift over to Amy. Amy, I know you focus heavily on the PC and endpoint side of our business here at Dell. We also know that endpoints are where the threat actors really like to have an easy time at getting into penetrating different organizations. Mm-hmm. First, do you think this is true? And could you do two things for us? One, first, can you tell us the types of things we should do and need to think about when protecting our endpoints from different threat actors? And second, can you tell us how Dell specifically aligns themselves to kind of those situations and scenarios to help organizations protect themselves?
Two very good questions. Thanks, Steve. So I'd like to start with this first one, which is the kinds of things that you need to be thinking about when you think about protecting your environment. I think that first, according to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, majority of the attacks do begin at the endpoint. So it's incredibly important to begin with the end in mind. And you do that by adopting a zero trust mindset. And you work to gain as well a deeper understanding of the adversaries that you might be encountering along the way. And then beyond that, know what this cyber attacker could potentially do, who they are, what motivates them, and how they operate. And we do that internally through our adversarial threat models. And I think also ensuring that the PCs that you provide, that you buy and deploy within your system have multiple layers of defense that gives you both visibility and control across the IT ecosystem. And to get that, it's important to work with trusted partners like Dell. And then I'd like to go a little bit into how Dell actually protects and designs our PCs to protect customers in environments. And there's sort of an ingredients list here that you can think about it. So to start with built-in security. So for instance, from a secure design and supply chain perspective, so before the PC even leaves our offices or leaves our manufacturing facility, these are things that Dell does very well. So we start with the actual design of the PC, actually running it through the secure development lifecycle, testing it to see how well it works in various threat model situations, how we work with our suppliers and maintain very tight control over the supply chain. These are things that Dell traditionally has done very well. We rely on them as our superpowers for ensuring that devices that Dell designs and builds are designed and built safely and securely for our customers. The second portion of this is to have built-in security to defend against evolving threats. And I'm not talking about adding antivirus to a system. I'm talking about having built-in BIOS level visibility as well as security around your end user credentials, which is the highest value target for an attacker. And with the hardware-based security features Dell provides, these are things that we do standard for our commercial AI PCs through Safe BIOS and Safe ID. This is an array of things that Dell has developed over a long period of time, and they're designed to mitigate the risk of device compromise and identity compromise. And they're among the reasons why we are the most secure commercial PC. I think the last thing I would say here is that we've built a really great trusted supplier ecosystem because we know security is a team sport. And this includes best-of-breed applications from people like CrowdStrike, Absolute, Zscaler, Okta, Halcyon, and it also includes core integrations that we've done with a number of them. Why is all this important? It lets customers layer on software solutions for enhanced visibility and control across the endpoint, network, and cloud environments. And these are all major gateways for attacks. There's one more thing I'd like to talk about in this frame, and a lot of you have AI right now in your minds, like what am I doing to secure my AI PCs, or how will I secure my infrastructure as we move into the AI generation? Well, I want to bring to you that AI really is a double-edged sword, and that the same technology that you may be using for good, we're seeing attackers leverage for nefarious purposes. And I mean, you hear things, for instance, like vishing, where someone will it will imitate someone's voice, send a message, or actually have a conversation with an employee to get them to do something. And I think what's really important here is to limit the impact of what these kinds of attacks can do through good zero trust practices and close monitoring. And what do? Training, 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 and then some more training. And as Rachel does mention in her work, practice, practice, practice. You can't keep someone from flipping the switch, but you can make them aware of what they're doing it before they do it. Attackers will try to rush and move fast to help the targets trip up. Teach your employees to pause and think before they're doing. And why? Because, these techniques are going to get even better over time. But what I want to note is you must maintain that laser focus on keeping that fleet secure and resilient. Underlying objectives are also going to remain the same, but by keeping your fleet secure and adopting zero trust, it will reduce the blast radius and it will make recovery much faster. So be aware of your attack surfaces. You can't protect what you don't know. And that visibility and control over this is your biggest advantage in staying adaptive to threats and keeping ahead of the adversaries.
Wow, that's really great advice, Amy. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, especially the Dell components and the Dell capabilities. Next, what I'd like to do is go over to Rachel. Rachel, you see it all, especially since you work with a number of our top partners, and as Amy alluded to, security is a team sport. I wanted to ask you, from my first question to Jim, do you agree or disagree necessarily about this attack type and attack results? And I want to maybe have you elaborate on it for a moment. And then, how do you think organizations should realistically and proactively prepare for an attack? And additionally, from a recovery perspective, so the other end of the equation, how does incident recovery really fit into a holistic cybersecurity strategy?
Yes, thank you. I think Jim's explanation of ransomware is very, very important for our customers and all of us even here, right, in our regular everyday lives, to understand what the threat actors, what the bad guys are doing, how they are doing it, so that we can properly defend against it. If the idea is that, all that is happening is they are encrypting our devices, right, which is what we usually think of when we think of ransomware, that means we're looking for a very specific point solution like Halcyon, right? Like Amy mentioned, right? But if we understand that ransomware is bigger than that, and they can exfiltrate my data, they might destroy my data, there's all these different ways that attackers and the bad guys are getting in and using me to make money, right? Their main goal. If we understand that, we can more effectively and efficiently defend against that, and then respond to that when it happens. Now, once we get into the kind of response, I like to categorize companies and corporations into three categories when we talk about incident response. First category is not prepared at all. They are not prepared for an attack. Second category, they think they are prepared for an attack. Third category, they are actually prepared for an attack. How do we get from completely unprepared, which is a big portion of our incident response business here at Dell, comes from customers that were completely unprepared for an attack. Completely, right? They know it's out there, they know it can happen, but it's like a car accident. It's always happening to someone else until it happens to us, right? Like, a lot of our customers are completely unprepared when they are hacked. I'm going to just call it that, when they are breached, hacked, compromised. This slows down the process. Who do we call? How do we call them? What do I do, right? It's a moment of panic. It's happening really fast through your environment. The impact is huge. You can see the company kind of like grinding to a halt in front of your eyes, right? It is a very scary, very emotional thing that that happens when you get attacked, right? So like just from the very first, who do I even call? A little tidbit for all of everybody on here. When you get an incident response plan, which I'm going to get to, that needs to be printed out on a piece of paper because all of your stuff might be encrypted. All of your systems might be down, right? It needs to be printed out on a piece of paper. Then we get to who thinks they are prepared. People who think they are prepared are probably in a little bit of a worse spot than people who are completely unprepared, right? People who think they are prepared may have an incident response plan, a communication plan that's been generated in their environment. Maybe it's a year old. Maybe they aren't even thinking about it. Maybe the numbers aren't right anymore, and the people who are on the list don't even work there at that company anymore. They have a hard time identifying and quickly responding when something happens. Then we have the customers that are completely prepared for an incident to happen in their environment. They understand how to identify that incident. What are the symptoms of something happening in my environment? My user base understands all of those symptoms, so I can get faster reporting from my users, right? Hey, I'm seeing some lag time here. I'm seeing some of my files got encrypted. This is very weird, right? They have a way to identify and detect. They have a way to protect. They have an incident response plan. And most importantly, they've done tabletop exercises. Tabletop exercises is like taking your driving test before you're allowed to drive, right? It is so important that you and your organization understand exactly what to do when something happens in your environment. Who do you call? Who does what? What sections isolate? What sections work on rebuilding, recovering? Who do we call in for forensics? Who's interfacing with law enforcement? Who is interfacing with our, stakeholders? Who's interfacing with the media, right? Some of these big corporations, when they get hacked, they have to interface with the media too. They have a lot of consumers that are really worried about their data being exfiltrated or, at risk at this company. So all of these things, what's the impact? How do we respond? Who do we communicate with? And then most importantly, how do we effectively recover after this? If all of that is practiced, and I mean practice with realistic tabletop exercises, maybe you have attack simulations or pen testing running simultaneously, so it's a real attack happening in your network and you respond accordingly. Those are the customers that identify, isolate, and recover from these cyber attacks quickly and effectively. People get hacked all the time. It's not a question of if, but when. And if we are thinking like that, Amy mentioned zero trust, which says always assume breach. If we are thinking like that, we are having our incident response plans printed out, right? Communication plan printed out on a piece of paper. We have tabletop exercises, and we know what is going to happen when we get attacked. Those are the customers that are coming out of these pretty unscathed, right?
Rachel, thank you very much. That was very helpful and very insightful. And one of the things that you actually brought up during the session, and we're going to allude to more of this, is that human side of cybersecurity, like the things that go on from a people perspective. So I think that's pretty cool, and we should stay tuned for that.